And this is what I meant when I was trying to set the expectation in terms of both energy and rigor to the conversation. Now, Chris mentioned a couple of exciting parts of this new world, including startups in government. To hear what it is like to be part of that new world, please welcome Sarah Pearson, CEO and founder of the Canberra Innovation Network.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I always love talking about innovation, and I will apologise for my eternal optimism. I believe that disruption is a really exciting, energising place to be. And yeah, I get that disruption can be challenging, it can be scary, and at sometimes you don't want that disruption, but there's also some fabulous disruption. So I'm going to try and energise you today to get excited about the disruption that we all face. So I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship. So it's a bit more about the people I'm going to talk about. The role of entrepreneurship in society, how is that changing? What does that mean for you? The new economic reality, you live in the economic reality. What does that mean for you? And what does that mean for your service delivery? The so what? And then I'm going to do a couple of very short lessons from some delivery models because, as Chris said, it's all very well to have the theories and the ideas and the policy and all that, but someone's got to execute it. So how do you execute? What might work? And before I go to the next slide, I'm just going to say that I'm also going to preface that I'm doing this from a commercial perspective. So I've had a little bit of experience in government, but I was Global Head of Open Innovation at Cadbury, so Chris talking about that distributed, crowdsourced model, was very much engaged in that. And now I'm in the startup world, which is people setting up their own businesses. So I will bring that flavour to it. So this one here, entrepreneurship, is it on the rise? This is just a bit of stat that's, it's just a bit of an example to show you where job growth is. And this is not the only stat, it's all around the world. The US have got stats on this too. Majority of the job growth has come from the young, startup, emerging companies, not from the big companies. In fact, the big companies have been losing jobs. What does that mean in terms of the sort of people that you're engaging with? What does that mean in terms of the economy that you're engaging in? Also, there's a lot of people wanting to be entrepreneurs. The stat here is from Phoenix in the US. 63% of 20-somethings want to start a business. I think in the business schools it's greater than that. It's about 80%. If you go to Harvard, for instance, 80% of the business school participants want to start their own business. They're getting a bit fed up with the big organizations. They want to be agile. They want change. They want to be in control of their futures. They want to drive difference. And so what does that mean for you? Government tends to be a big organization. From my perspective in large multinationals, what's that mean for multinationals, big organizations? These people don't want to work there anymore. They want to set up their own companies. This is a picture of some guys and gals in our accelerator program. Down in Canberra, we've got an accelerator program called the Griffin Accelerator. I want to point out the number of women that we have in our accelerator. In fact, it's 80%. Of our founders are female, which is totally unheard of. Traditionally, it's about 16%. So something's working for our women in Canberra. I think part of it is that men are fantastic and very supportive. But anyway, I want to point out it's not just technology. Some of these people are making products. It's not all about ICT and web-based applications. The lads at the back, they've got a company that is helping people with their fun on bikes. They've got an online platform that tells you about some good routes to go, some great places to buy your bikes, some friends to meet. So you could think of that as a technology base. This lady here is actually helping online people to match where they want to have their exhibits, so they're art exhibits. So it is using technology, but it's not actually technology itself. This lady here is using 3D printing to design some toys for children that help them to eat properly. So there's a mixture of technology there. This lady here has developed an online site where you can design your own clothes, a bit like ladies in the crowd, you might know Shoes of Prey. This is Clothes of Prey. So you get to design the bits and pieces of your clothes that you want online. So there's a whole mixture of ICT but not ICT. So we've got this happening. If you don't think that's happening in Australia, well, welcome to the world. It is happening in Australia. So I was speaking to the VC at UTS a few months back, asking him about the stats for his students. 40% of his students are saying they want to start up their own startup. They want to start up a company. So this is not just the US. This is Australia too. And these are things that you have to face. And then lastly, in terms of entrepreneurship, people have portfolio careers now. They have portfolio jobs. Gone are perhaps the days of thinking that you can have the one job for the rest of your life. Some people have several jobs all at once. In fact, when I was in San Francisco last, the guy that drove me around in the Uber car, he was about to go off to his day job and he was renting out one of his rooms at home. So he had this portfolio of jobs. That's something that you're going to have to address as public servants. But I also want you to remember that it's something that you have to address as humans. So I loved Blair's joke last night. It was a great way of getting us all relaxed and listening to the rest of his comments. But he was talking about flexibility. So what this is all about is about people wanting flexibility. I mean, you may want to have a portfolio of jobs. You might want to do a little bit in the public service and a bit outside the public service. I actually think that'd be fantastic. Imagine the experience that you'd be able to bring to both sides of that. So that this is goes back to that flexibility thing too. You guys have to think that for yourselves as well as the people that you serve. And then there's the world around you. So that's the people and the jobs, the startup side of things. But then there's something pretty exciting going on around technology, which says that you don't need to have a bucket load of money to start something that's scalable and can go global. So for instance, Uber, world's largest taxi company, owns no taxis. So imagine the sorts of reduced resources needed to start up that company. Airbnb, world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. What does that mean? That means that you now can set up a business and scale it globally and grow it into a massive company without having to inject huge amounts of money. That means you can do it quickly, and it means that you can have big impact. So what does that mean? That means the people that you're engaging with can do this, but also you can do this. You can think about how to do this within the public service. So there's also data and other online things. So if Facebook were a country, it'd be the second largest in the world. That's pretty amazing. So if you think you don't need to, if you don't think you don't need to engage in social media, think again. Second largest company in the world between China and India. You better get on there. Number of internet devices in 1984 was 1,000. In 2014, it was 10 billion. So this is an opportunity. You can see it as a challenge, but it's also a fantastic opportunity. 10 billion of these devices that you guys can interact with. What a great channel for getting your word out there. It took 38 years for radio to reach a market of 50 million. Internet took 4 years. Angry Birds took 35 days. So again, what does that mean? That means that the people that you're dealing with, they have to react like this. They cannot react slowly anymore. So your systems and processes have to be able to enable that. But also, it's good news for you. It means if you want to set something out there quickly, maybe you can do some sort of Angry Birds version and get your messages, your services out there and used by 50 million people in 35 days. So it's got its benefits for you guys. And then there's the data side of things, which was mentioned a little bit earlier. In 1900, human knowledge doubled every 100 years. By 2020, it'll double every 12 hours. So how on earth are you going to cope with that? If data, knowledge, all these things that you're going to base frank and fearless policy advice on is changing so quickly, how on earth are you going to cope with that? I would like to argue that you can't. And thinking that you can do it on your own is, quite frankly, ridiculous. I mean, Chris was talking about basically open innovation models that Obama has been trying to utilize. And I think it means that you need to think about what sort of an organization is the public service. Like a multinational, for instance. Probably 10 years ago, they started to think, oh yeah, perhaps we better open the doors a bit. Let's, open the door. Let's tell people what we need. Let's start to collaborate with other people. It's moved on. I mean, we in Australia are still way behind the ballpark on this one. We're starting to go, oh yeah, that might be interesting. Well, that's a good idea. But actually the world has moved on. Now, organizations, yourself included, need to be flexible. It's not enough to be open. You need to think about your shape and your structure. So a company might be this size at one stage, and then it's this size, and then it's that shape, and then it collaborates with this bit over here, it spins that bit out over there. You need to think about that for the public service, that stability model and the large scale. Maybe it's time to think that through. There was a bit of a derogatory remark about consultants earlier, and I'd have to have a bit of an agree with that. They do have a bad name, but why don't we start to think about these people outside of your organisation as partners? Forget the word consultants, academics, whatever you want to call it. It's partners. So the only way you're going to be able to cope with this is massive and changing, ever-changing partnership. How are you going to do that? So what? I talked about a few of it. Obviously, connectivity and mobility, that's understood. You know, if the number of internet connections goes up to, was it 10 billion, that means that's how people want to be connected with. They're using it. I know myself, I find all the services I receive are really, really frustrating. So we need to do something about that. Tax and regulations need to adapt for portfolio careers. So if you are someone who's going to have a little bit of a job, some people have like 10 jobs all on the go. How on earth are your the taxes and regulations going to be able to adapt and allow for that? What I didn't put here in terms of delivery of customers changing lives is your changing lives. How does the public service change for your changing lives and what you as public servants want from your career and your life? Opportunity for flexible service delivery, accessing the crowd. So Chris talked about that. Why on earth would you think that you guys and gals are the only ones with all the great ideas? So Procter & Gamble now have 50% of products that go to market are from outside of Procter & Gamble. They've understood that they don't own all the great people and the bright people around the world. They source the crowd globally. Now you've got that opportunity. All those people connected, you have that opportunity to do that. And then of course there's open data. So Chris was pointing to his friend in the back there about open data. Yes, open it up and use that crowd, use those bright people. I know earlier on there was talk about some not quite so educated, maybe well-educated people who are blogging, etc. But there's some really, really bright people out there. There's an online platform called Kaggle. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it's a stats crowd. Is that my no? It's a stats crowdsourcing platform. So if you've got a stats challenge, put your stats up there and the crowd around the world will solve it. So NASA had a challenge. They'd been spending 10 years trying to work out how to work with this data about dark matter, and they gave up. So they sent it to Kaggle thinking, yeah, this is so hard. All our fantastic scientists at NASA have been doing this for 10 years. This is so hard. Kaggle solved it within 2 weeks. They went to the crowd, and actually it was a public servant who was bored during the day, went home, spent all night doing his stats at home in the bedroom, and he solved it in 2 weeks. Can you believe it? He and the crowd. Can you believe that? I can. I think it's fantastic. So make the most of that. And then commercial delivery without needs for assets. Now that's for you. Remember I talked about Airbnb and Uber. That's what you, the public service, can do. You can set these things up without having to invest lots and lots of money in infrastructure. So you can do that. But also, you'll see ever increasing number of commercial entrants to this market going, you know what, government's not moving fast enough. I'm going to do it. But why not partner with those people? Why not find them and work with them, partner with them, let them take the risk, and then let them do the delivery. Regulatory risk and policy challenges, so paradigm shifts while supporting transition. Obviously, there's a paradigm shift that you need to go through. How do you support each other in that transition? But also industry, so Uber is a classic one. How do you support that transition? The paradigm shift is there, it's happening, you can't stop it. How do you support in that transition? Ownership of delivery. That can be a bit scary for government, in my experience, but I would thoroughly recommend you give it a go, and I'm going to give you a bit of an example in a second. And the development of policy in a period of exponential change, I mentioned that earlier. How are you going to cope? Data changing every 12 hours. How are you going to arrange your policy around that? So a couple of lessons I'm going to talk about, but very, very briefly. The first one is the innovation exchange that Chris mentioned, and I wanted to make the point here about a couple of things. One about success versus experience, but also the inside versus outside model. So DFAT decided they would do innovation, have a go at innovation inside DFAT. So they thought they'd set up an entity inside DFAT to do that. Now, my view is if there was a silver bullet, we'd all be using it. Inside, outside, there's no guarantee of success for either of them. It's actually down to the people. The people that do it are probably the most important, and their connectivity both inside and outside of an organisation. So that's the first lesson. The other one is this about, has the innovation exchange been about success? And I would argue there has been success. Or is it about experience? I actually think the most valuable part of the innovation exchange is it was giving it a go. It's having an experiment, trying something out, learning from some things, and using that experience to take it to IXC 2.0. So don't be afraid of experimenting, and don't be afraid of the fact that some parts of what you do will fail. The challenge is to have a portfolio, I think, a portfolio approach that most of what you do succeeds, but don't forget to experiment, and that will mean that some of it won't work. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is the model that I'm working on, which is the Canberra Innovation Network. We're basically trying to develop an innovation ecosystem in Canberra. And we've been going for 18 months and it's going absolutely gangbusters. The government has been thrilled. We are a separate entity. We're not in government. Government took the risk. They said, you know what, we reckon the community are mature enough to do this, and actually they can do it a lot better than we can. They took the risk, gave us the money, said, we'll stay in touch, but it's up to you. And it's really worked for them. So do come and see us at some stage and find out more about us, or ask on the panel. And lastly, drop by. So I'm going to have to leave at lunch because we've got our first Wednesday Connect night. First Wednesday of every month, we open our doors to everybody who wants to come in. We get somewhere between 200 and 250 people every month coming into our Canberra Innovation Network. And if you're in Canberra on the first Wednesday of any month, drop in 5 o'clock and meet angel investors, venture capitalists, big government, small government, big business, small business, entrepreneurs, researchers, service providers, the whole lot, all in one go. And I'm sure you'll find it a fantastic experience. We also run things called Lean Startup Workshops. There was talk about how do you inject. So Chris was talking about the entrepreneurs or the intrapreneurs that have been injected in Obama's administration. We're actually training public servants around the Lean Startup methodology, and if it does nothing else, it just gets that culture change happening. We had about 50 public servants come through in Innovation, Public Sector Innovation Month. So again, if you're interested in any of that, then come and be part of that to seed some of that entrepreneurial experience. That was all I'm going to say.